Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the Managing Director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. In this video today we're going to be discussing immigrant visas, specifically for spouses of American citizens, so IR-1 and CR-1 categories for American citizens with spouses from Vietnam. And we're talking about cases that specifically are going to be consular processed. The U.S. visa application at the end of the process is going to be processed in Vietnam. In the vast majority of cases, this is going to presumably be occurring at the U.S. consulate in Ho Chi Minh City. So how does this process work? Basically, it's sort of a multi-phase process. I look at it in three phases. First, you're going to be dealing with the Department of Homeland Security's United States Citizenship and Immigration Service, where you're going to need to go ahead and deal with the filing of a petition for immigrant visa benefits. Thereafter, assuming approval, the case is going to be sent to the National Visa Center. Now, just as a quick aside, cases aren't just necessarily approved as a matter of course by Department of Homeland Security. Sometimes further evidence is necessary and a request for evidence will be issued. In some cases, it'll be determined that the individuals, the marital parties in question, don't meet the requirements, and the case could be denied. Fairly rare that you see denial of a petition, but that being said, it can happen. So that being said, after petition approval, things are going to move over to the National Visa Center, which is under the auspices of the Department of State. National Visa Center in immigrant visa cases acts as a document gathering apparatus, as well as sort of a clearinghouse and facilitator of scheduling of visa interviews at the relevant embassy or consulate overseas. Unlike the K categories, the K1 and the K3 visas, which we have videos specifically on that on this channel, unlike those categories, in immigrant visa cases involving spouses of an American citizen or a spouse of an American citizen, the National Visa Center has a much more in-depth operational mandate, I guess I should say. They scrutinize a lot more things. They're going to be asking for various documentation, and then they're going to be making sure everything that's been requested has been submitted, and if submitted, they're going to go ahead and then send the visa package on to, in this case, probably the U.S. consulate in Ho Chi Minh City for further action. Specifically, they're going to go ahead and schedule the interview there. That being said, it should be noted that the NVC doesn't exactly pre-adjudicate these matters, but they do kind of do a pre-review. They're basically getting all their ducks in a row, basically to best facilitate more efficient processing by the embassies and consulates overseas. There's another video specifically on this channel which discusses certain resource issues that are going to be coming up, I think, in the relatively near future with respect to Department of State and how it allocates resources for immigrant and non-immigrant visa application and processing. But that being said, NVC plays a pretty critical role in sort of front-loading a lot of, for lack of a better term, the paperwork, if you will, of dealing with the visa process. So NVC is a pretty important component of the immigrant visa process, and it's not an overly important component of, say, the K1 or the K3 process. That being said, once the case is over at the U.S. consulate in Ho Chi Minh City, the case will then, again, it'll be set for interview. There'll need to be an interview with the U.S. consular officer. The U.S. consular officer can do a number of different things, but in most cases you're going to see one of three things happen: either approval, possibly denial. Denial can happen pursuant to a finding of some sort of legal ground of inadmissibility. There's another video on this channel specifically pertaining to legal grounds of inadmissibility and I-601 waivers and the specific grounds of legal inadmissibility that may exist in certain cases. And then finally, if it's not approved or denied, there is sort of another third category where they can issue what's called a 221G, request for further documentation. A 221G is a refusal of the underlying visa application, but it's a refusal pending further documentation being submitted to the consular officer for further review. In most cases involving 221Gs, if you do go ahead and submit the relevant documentation that's requested and the consular officer is satisfied with the documentation submitted, in most cases that consular officer will go ahead and thereafter approve the case, and if the case is approved, you deal with things accordingly, and we'll get into that here in a minute. Another thing that should be noted specifically with respect to the U.S. consulate in Ho Chi Minh City is it is what is, they scrutinize, it's a high volume post, and the fraud prevention unit is very serious about their job at that post. I'm not saying that they're not serious in other posts, but it's a higher volume post, and it's a post that does have a history of a very meticulous fraud prevention unit apparatus, and they do even have, it's been said and known to see field officers. They'll actually send officers out of the consular post to go ahead and ascertain the facts surrounding the marital situation, to ascertain whether or not, if the couple is claimed to be living together in Vietnam, they'll go and check and see if they're living together, things like this. So filing a really top-notch visa application through that post is going to be a pretty good idea, because you need to have all your ducks in a row with respect to dealing with these things, because failure to do so could result in delays in processing the overall case, because of questions that may come up just in the normal course of duty of the consular officer, but also in the sort of extended course of duty that happens in the fraud prevention unit apparatus. So these are things to keep in mind with respect to consular processing at the U.S. Consulate in Ho Chi Minh City. Finally, assuming approval, the visa will be sent to the applicant fairly shortly after approval, and once approved, there'll be an issuance date and an expiration date noted in the visa itself, and the applicant is free to move to the United States shortly thereafter. It should be noted with CR-1 visas specifically, that applicant is in what's called conditional permanent residence. We have another video on this channel which specifically discusses conditional permanent residence versus unconditional permanent residence. IR-1 visa holders are granted what's called unconditional lawful permanent residence in the United States, and they are able to remain in the United States effectively indefinitely, presuming there's no bar to them remaining legally or otherwise, or they commit some criminal act thereafter upon arrival. But assuming all goes smoothly after their arrival in the United States in IR-1 status, they can remain in the United States pretty much indefinitely thereafter.